Good afternoon. I'm Craig Howse, and this is my wife, Lisa, and we are pleased to be with you, especially since we know so many of you. And we were blessed just in the preparation for this day. So thanks, Jonathan, for inviting us. Marriage is a mixed bag. So as those of you who are not married, I'm going to set some expectations for you. And for those who are, you'll probably feel this with us. For us, marriage is the thing that's given us the greatest joys, or some of the greatest joys in our life, greatest comfort, wonderful memories, and future hopes, because we're still looking forward to our married life together. Marriage is also the thing, though, that has given us some of our moments of sorrow, discomfort, and discouragement, and frustration. That's the mixed bag of marriage. It's been our greatest relational high, and it's been our, I would say, greatest relational low, but we've experienced pain in it. But regardless of the season of marriage, marriage has been a very good thing, and I believe it will be in the future. I'm very optimistic about marriage and about our marriage. There's certainly difficulties to come. We know that. So when we reflect back, we don't think the past is where we've worked through things and it's all good going forward. We know there's going to be difficulties ahead. But I love Lisa, and when we were dating, the place I wanted to be the most was with Lisa, and that hasn't changed. And I don't think it will, as long as God is helping us. But as we were thinking about this talk about marriage and sharing reflections on our marriage, that's what Jonathan tasked us with, we thought it would be most helpful in talking about it to reflect upon the areas in which we've grown the most, and those areas are the areas of difficulty. It wouldn't probably encourage you too much for us to talk about the things that we were most encouraged by, perhaps, but rather to hear the things that helped us most, because that's the help you're going to need, either in marriage to come or in marriage today. So our hope is that as we express how God has helped us in our own times of challenge or difficulty, it will be helpful to you. Lisa's going to go first, and then I'll share some thoughts following you.
Before I talk about what is really on my heart, which is my history of ideas of what God used to help me in my marriage through our 27 years together, I wanted to answer a question that Jonathan put out in our email, which was, what do the roles look like in our marriage? And I thought, it's a very good question, and so I just want to touch briefly on just to give you kind of background on who we are, especially in our roles. Craig and I were both blessed to have parents that modeled this in a beautiful way, and it looked not only natural, but it looked like a very joyful way of relating in a marriage. And so we had that blessing coming into our marriage, that we had the same expectations of our roles. And of course, sin and our personalities complicated that, but that was our goal. And when I say that he is the head of our home, as we see in Genesis with Adam and Eve, I mean that he was my protector and my leader and my provider. And he did that well. And to me, this means that he bears the weight, particularly for what happens in our home. So if we disagree on the way something should be carried out or a decision coming up, I know that God is going to work through his decision ultimately. So if I'm in conflict in my soul, feeling like something that he's deciding on might be detrimental to the kids or something like that, I can have confidence that if it's Craig's final decision, it is God's will for me, and I can submit to that. Because I believe that by God's design, that's how it is to function in our home. So that has been a blessing that was instilled in me, that to be a person under authority, which all of you are, single, married, male or female, we're all people under authority to the Word of God and to the elders in our church. So just having the confidence that being under Craig's authority was the greatest protection in my life has allowed me and helped me to submit to things when it feels challenging to me. I also really benefited by Craig's leadership in the fact that he has mission statements for a lot of things that we do in the home. And we shaped a lot of them together, which we love doing. We love talking about that late at night. And so I get to participate in that. But at the end of the day, when I can't get a hold of him at work because he's busy, I have a trajectory for for the decisions I need to make on a daily basis. And I don't feel micromanaged. I get to use my brain. I get to implement them. But he has a mission statement for what he would like our home to look like. And then I can work within that, make decisions for the kids or finances or whatever, knowing that I am under his authority and I feel protected and I feel safe under that. So just for you singles out there, I want to remind you that if God does not call you to marriage, everything that we say today in terms of marriage relationally does apply to you, because when you're living with a roommate or functioning in a family, functioning in the church, all of these things are going to really play out for good or bad in your life relationally with people. And then everything that we talk about that has to do with authority applies to you, because you are people under authority too. So in my history of ideas, I'm going to start with this. I had 3 general guides that I would look to in terms of what I thought would make our marriage strong and healthy. And early in our marriage, I thought the concept of love and respect was very important. I thought that Craig was going to flourish most if I could respect him and if he felt my respect, just as I wanted to be loved. And it wasn't from the book or the seminar. I just felt like that was a biblical mandate for us. And so we lived by that, but I found after a short time that well, first of all, I didn't even know that when I was disrespecting him. He would tell me something didn't feel respectful, and I would say, what? I didn't even know what he was referring to. My conscience wasn't pricked in any way. But Elizabeth Elliot helped me when she said that after being widowed twice and being married to 3 different men, she said that respect looked different in each of her marriages. And that was so helpful to me. So I stopped looking at other women as role models in my life to know how to respect Craig, but I just had to trust that God would show me, that he would counsel me, and that his spirit would prick my heart when I was violating it. And it just became something that only the Lord could mentor me through in teaching me how to respect Craig and to build him up in that way. And at the same time, after a few years of this, I felt like it was becoming a problem for me to function this way, because I felt like I had a right every time I felt unhappy or unresolved in any way, that I could go to Craig and say, you're not meeting my needs in this way, and if you want to love me, well, you're not doing this. And so I felt like I had this right that became a burden to him, and I thought he should fix it. So that didn't, God freed me from that. And then I entered a new season where we both wanted to really live in grace with each other. I wanted to extend grace to him as I knew that I needed grace also, and I've been the recipient of such grace. So we stopped kind of picking on little things in our relationship and just focused on, let's just pray and ask the Lord to change their heart, and let's not work through so many little things. And so we were freed up from a lot of those more detailed conversations and just living in grace, which was such a gift, and the kind of grace that we all want to be recipients of in all of our relationships. So the selfish habits that had been a part of our first stage of marriage were starting to dissipate as I could just come to the Lord with some of those things. But the most important lesson that I learned, which thrust me into this 3rd season, which I feel like I'm in right now, was brought to my attention when we came to Bethlehem about 12 years ago, and also when I picked up the book Future Grace. It was just life-changing for me, because I realized that all the needs that I had, especially for a woman, a lot of needs are just emotional. It wasn't about the house, and it wasn't about finances. It was about being free from anxiety, feeling secure, dealing with selfishness and pride, all of these things. They were all addressed in areas of lack of belief. Where was my faith not serving me well? What grace of God was I not trusting in for my life? And so being able to go to the Lord with all of the concerns of my heart and recognize that I'm short on faith somewhere. Lord, would you show me where I am lacking the faith that your grace is sufficient for me? And so I just want to summarize all of this by giving an example of what this would look like in the 3 different stages, and hopefully when you see this picture, it will be more helpful to you. So early on in our marriage, we always loved to have people in our home. So maybe on a Sunday morning, this isn't a specific scenario, but it's a likely one. It could have happened. After church, Craig says, hey, let's invite those 3 couples over for dinner, or these 2 families that have 10 kids over for dinner. And I'd be like, I'm not, I'm not ready for this, but I'm going to try to submit to you. So we have the people over, and it's kind of a frustrating day. My house wasn't ready, and I didn't have sufficient food. And in the end, I just say, Craig, I was so embarrassed by that. I didn't have sufficient time, and please don't do that again, because I felt so embarrassed. I looked inept as a homemaker, and I just didn't have what it took to pull this off, and I felt really embarrassed. Well, then a few years later, I'm learning it's not all about me. It's not justifiable to say, don't do that, it embarrasses me. But what's deeper than that is I need to love well. I need to love people well. And so a few years later, we have people in our home on the way home from church says, oh, let's have these people over. Let's call them up. And spontaneously, they come to my house. My house is a mess, and I don't have enough food. And then I'm like, afterwards, I'll say, Craig, I can't love people well when I'm not prepared. Please help me to be more prepared. I need more notice because I feel terrible when I can't love people well. But now with just this new understanding that I have, and in the season that I'm in right now, it's so much sweeter to get in a situation like that and say the same thing were to happen. We're coming home from church and home's not quite ready and the food isn't quite sufficient. But when it comes up, I can say, Craig, would you first pray with me right now? Just help me to trust that the food that we have is what God wants these people to be served, and that the home that we're welcoming these people to is a home where they're going to feel welcomed, and it's what they need to experience for today. Would you just help me to trust that God is sufficient in this and that He's prepared us for this day? So in summary of all those things, I would just say that a mature marriage is made up of mature members, and a mature church is made up of mature members. And as we can grow in faith and rest in the grace that God supplies, relationally and in our own hearts, it's just a great place to be.
So Lisa's sharing, she's reflecting on sort of the progression of our life and our marriage. And Jonathan gave us a series of questions to consider that cover topics that might be helpful to you. And as I looked at the questions, I thought from my perspective, I could probably touch on a lot of the topics if I honed in on really the outworking of 1 Peter 3:7. And you know the text, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way. So I want to talk about our marriage, and you're free to chime in here and adjust. Talk about our marriage in 2 seasons. Our early season of marriage, and now what I'd call a later season of marriage. In the first season, obviously we were younger then, and I was younger, and I did not have a grasp on this idea of living with your wife in an understanding way. I knew the verse, but I really didn't grasp it. I didn't understand it. And after, I would say, we're almost married 28 years next month. She was quite young when we married. After 28 years, I'm starting to get a hold of this. So even now as I talk about it, I don't want you to think I really understand Lisa in all the deepest ways. By the grace of God, hopefully it's better than when we were 23 and becoming husband and wife. What has gotten in the way of this, especially in the younger years, was the press of life events. Kids, work, daily challenges and commitments. My own disposition to push ahead, that's my wiring, is to hit it hard at times, and my own selfishness. And those all work against me to continually consider her and to wonder, to think through what is it that Lisa needs. How is this event or circumstance affecting her? What's she feeling? How is she thinking about what's going on around her? What would help her? And so on. So these are all the questions I didn't know to ask. And I've regularly had to now push against the current of life to ask those questions. You leave me to my natural bent, I'm still going to move ahead pretty strongly to accomplish the objective, and along the way sort of be blind to what's going on around me, and even at times to Lisa. And so when I think about that verse in the early parts of our marriage, I don't think I did it well. In fact, I think I did it pretty poorly. As a new husband, I had a strong work ethic, and there's all kinds of stories that could go in, but why that was what it was. We'll have another talk about that someday. I'm for a strong work ethic, by the way. And I had a desire to establish myself in work, so I gave myself to work. We had 5 children. We were homeschooling. She was doing most of it, but we were both involved. We were active in church. And in fact, from 30 to 40 years of age, we're 51 now. I'm 51, and then you're, okay. From 30 to 40 years of age, we were heavily involved in a church plant, leading a church plant. So we were spread pretty thin, and we knew it then, and looking back, I can even see more so. But because I had the ability, at least during that stage of my life, I thought I did, and I think in ways I did, to rally for the next thing, I expected Lisa to do it also. So with little thought, I often treated Lisa as my equal. Now, hear me when I say that. She is my equal in one way, but in another way, she's not, because we're not the same. We're different. But I treated her as though she were me. So I expected her to keep my pace. We have a different pace, but I didn't consider that. And as I charged ahead, I thought she would charge ahead. What I endured, I expected her to endure. As I reacted, I expected her to react. My default thinking was, if I make a turn, she's going to make the same turn, and it's going to make just as much sense to her as it does to me. And there wasn't always a lot of conversation about it. And so if you do that, you're not living with your wife in an understanding way. And you can do that with all sorts of innocence and naivety. It wasn't out to hurt her. We were one, and we were on task together in so many ways. But I wasn't considering her needs. I wasn't taking time to carefully consider her, understand her, or know her needs, her capacities, or our differences. More often than not, I recognized our differences when she was not keeping up, or the house wasn't kept to the expectations that I had based on the way my mom kept the house, right? Those differences would show up, and then that would become an area of conflict. But I was not thinking about the differences between her and I, differences that would either be good for me or differences that signal that's an area where I need to nurture her. So, from my own failings, I'm talking to men here for the moment. So, from my own failings in this younger years of life, men, in the press of life, and a lot of you are in it or going into it. If you're married and you're on the ministry track, you're most likely going to be in a situation where you're all things to all people, at least in their minds, and they're going to be pulling and yanking, and the needs are going to be great. But in the press of life, going to have to pause. You're going to, in the midst of the demands of ministry, work, and family, do not expect your wife to weather everything you weather or to be you, because she's not. Instead, consider her, know her, pay attention to her, and understand her and what she needs in life and work and ministry, and work to provide that for her. It's going to take some intentionality. Recognize her differences, and not just when they bother you. The unique way that God has made Lisa and wired her for our relationship, I needed to know that. You need to know that about either your wife or your future wife. Know how she's different in her communications, in her thinking, and her thinking's different than my thinking. In her energy, in her capacity, in her expressions of love. We love differently. It feels different between the two of us to express love. In her insecurities, in her need for downtime, and many other ways. Discern how these differences are given to you by God for your good, or maybe because this is an area in which God is asking you to lovingly, patiently, carefully nurture your wife and bring her along. So live with her according to her unique design. So while this was a shortcoming in our early years of marriage because of me, there was a sweet blessing that God gave us that did bring us together. I want to share that as well in this season of life because I think it has application to many of you. And it was ministry together. Lisa's a gifted musician and worship leader. I am not. That was a difference I recognized clearly when we married and felt it. But this was a huge difference that was so beneficial for this church plant that we were involved in. And so we planned the service together. I was often the one teaching or preaching. We would plan the service together, the order, the music, the transitions, and then we would lead it together. And so our lives were really focused in so much on the same thing in our ministry. And so whether you are going to be vocational or non-vocational, you're going to be people of the church. And that's what we're singing about today, right? That's our thought. And so here's an encouragement. It's more than a suggestion. Minister with your wife. Try to avoid your wife going out over here ministering and you go out over here ministering. It's okay for that to happen in seasons and settings, but see if you can't pull that in so that you're ministering together, so that you're working with the same people. It will do wonders in knitting your soul together. So minister together. So my first lesson is pay attention to your wife. The second lesson from this early years of my life were minister together. It's going to strengthen your marriage. So the first season of our marriage was marked more by internal struggles, but very little external struggle. We used to say, nobody in our family has died, nobody's got cancer. When is the other shoe or when is the first shoe going to drop? Because we knew that things were pretty good, at least in the external aspects of our life. In the second season of life, there were a series of external trials. And these are God-designed. And it is so good to believe in the sovereignty of God when you encounter them. It was in this season of life where we have external trials, though, that I began to see our differences more, and this was good, very good. I experienced differences that God had given to Lisa to help me. And you'll see why. And I saw differences that I knew that I was supposed to be helping her address and develop in. And God used these external pressures on our lives then to help our marriage. I don't have time to recount all that has transpired, but I'm going to give you a list of what God has led Lisa and me, both separately and together, through in the past 7 or 8 years. And in terms of circumstances, they've been the most difficult years of our life. So here's a rapid succession of the events that we've had. And I say these things because they're all public if you know us. And if you don't know us, you think I'm telling secrets. I don't. You go to the North Campus, people who know us know these things. A daughter ran away and married. A client of mine was indicted for business crimes that led me into the midst of a federal investigation. Lisa's dad was tried and convicted for tax evasion. Lisa's dad was imprisoned, and her mom came to live with us. That last part was not a trial. Another child created a significant legal consequence for himself at a very young age. Our daughter, who ran away, was put under church discipline from this pulpit. Lisa's dad got cancer and was released from prison into our home. And he died about a year ago. So it's a rather shocking list. And when I read the list, I wonder, what's wrong with these people? And then I realize, we are these people. This is our life for the last 7 or 8 years. But in each of these events, and though they've been very heavy to us, God has been working, and he's been working on our marriage. If I read the list, it really doesn't communicate the weight of these things on us, but certainly God was putting that weight on us, and it has helped us. So here's some ways that it has. First, experiencing these external struggles together, it drove us together. We prayed together. You add some of these things to your life, your prayer life just blossoms. It's amazing how that works. So we prayed together. We fought anxiousness together. We read the same books. Future Grace was a foundation for us in these past years. And we cried out to God together as we lived through these experiences. So it drove us together. Secondly, these trials, and especially the indictment and investigation of my client, became such a heaviness to me personally that it was a daily struggle for a significant season for me to move forward. So I had been the charger in the early years of our marriage, and now on some days I was forcing myself to get out of bed. I never imagined that I would find myself in the middle of those kind of circumstances. And the weight of it, whether it was weight I should have felt or it was just God letting me feel it, it was a lot. So in the past I had pulled Lisa along, but now it seemed I was barely moving myself. And now I was leaning on Lisa in ways that I had never imagined. And God was using this to show me the value of our differences. I was reviewing my journal in preparation for today, ran across two entries, they're short. August 26, 2011. Father, I find such solace in my soul in these early morning hours with you. That was shared this morning in prayer with Lisa. She's a gift from you and a minister to me when she prays with me. I didn't expect this, I'm sorry. September 16, 2011. Father, you helped me yesterday after a time of exhaustion. You answered my specific prayer. Here was my specific prayer from the day before. I need your help to walk through this day. I need your help to make decisions on how to handle the things that need to be done today and tomorrow. Can you send someone to help me and guide me? When Lisa and I prayed, so this was the next day I'm writing, when Lisa and I prayed together, she offered to walk through the day with me. That was a help to me. I had no expectation that Lisa would be that person for me. She's a gift from you. Thank you. She said that morning she could tell, would you like me to go to work with you? So she did. She sat in the office just so I could focus. So as I was being humbled and saw myself in ways that I had never seen before, others did, I'm sure, but in need and in desperation that I'd never experienced, God was helping me through Lisa. As he did, I was not only helped, but I was learning things about Lisa. The understanding I didn't have, I was gaining. Namely, that in the big external circumstances in life, the non-relational things of life, Lisa has a great faith. And that I'd never understood that before. The amount of her faith. Work could go away and the house burn, and Lisa would be trusting God. She wouldn't be panicked. I'd feel concerned. Lisa would be fine. God will provide. This was a difference I needed for my faith. Thirdly, I learned during the waywardness and the discipline of our daughter that Lisa is greatly troubled by relational unrest. So as strong as she is in non-relational settings, in relational settings, that unrest is extremely bothering to her. And even though she has this great faith in the other areas of turmoil, not here. Lisa and I found ourselves having very different thoughts and feelings as we walked through and talked through how as a family we should be responding to our daughter as she was in the process of church discipline, and how the church should respond to her. Lisa was seeing it one way, I was seeing it another. And this was the making of a fissure in our relationship. You could feel the cracks starting to develop, and I knew that this had the potential to really blow up and cause great conflict between us. And in that, God strongly and clearly impressed on me that I should work to understand Lisa. Understand what she was thinking, what she was feeling, and that we should carefully think through our situation and our response to our daughter and in our engagement with the church, which we were thankful that they were actually applying church discipline. But to walk through that carefully from the Bible and to chart a clear course together, not with me developing it and then telling her this is where we're going, but me doing I did a lot of the homework and then coming together and talking about it and saying, do we see what God says the same way? Why not? And then coming to careful considerations together. So this wasn't a time for compromise. We weren't managing our differences and trying to find this middle ground. But instead, it was a time for careful consideration of our differences and moving forward together, trusting God in His way. I needed to live with Lisa in an understanding way and to help her. And with God's help, we walked through that. And it was good for us. So here are 4 lessons from this second season of life. Number 1, God is faithful to bring us through significant external testing to refine us and our marriages. So if you want to be married, you're signing up for that. So you should expect that. In your singleness, maybe you'll enjoy being single a bit more and not be too eager to jump in that fire. Because when you enter marriage, expect that God, I don't think we're unique. Our list is unique. But you're going to have your own set of circumstances, your own list. So recognize these trials. They're going to come. They're from God. They're given to strengthen your marriage, and approach them with this mindset. So what I'm encouraging you to do is to have the right thinking about these trials. Don't let them blow your marriage up. Rather, think about them as given by God to strengthen your marriage. Number 2, these truths reveal our differences. These trials reveal our differences, both in ways that we need to be strengthened, each of us, and in ways we need to help strengthen the other. Number 3, expect that God will use your spouse's differences to help strengthen your faith. It's not just going to reveal them to you. He put us together for our good and for our mutual strengthening, sanctification, growth in faith. Men, to you, finally, last one here, especially see trials as a particular time where you need to lead your wife and lead in understanding her. You need to set the tone of that. You need to model that. You need to be the one that initiates it. That's your responsibility. So what's come of us in this list of messes? First, our daughter has repented and been restored to membership at Bethlehem, at this pulpit. The investigation concluded, and God has protected me in many ways. Number 3, Lisa's dad was a strong believer, and you may have a hard time getting your head wrapped around how a believer can evade taxes and get committed to prison. Doesn't mean he's not a believer, and he was. He passed away trusting God and with good relationships with his wife and his children, and he is now free in every way. Mom lives with us, and she's a blessing. Our son, who created consequences in his youth, came to Christ after those consequences. Finished high school strong, spent a year at Bethlehem College, for which we are very thankful, and is now continuing in college while pursuing a military career. And our marriage is deeper and sweeter because of our differences. Some of these differences, of course, are differences for us to strengthen each other, and other differences are the areas for our strengthening. So the conclusion of the message has been very good, which is the story of how God works, right? He does not lead us through these things to hurt us, to harm us, but ultimately to do us good, and he has in our marriage. So may God help us live with each other in an understanding way. And men, take the lead. You're young. Don't wait till you're older to understand this. Let me pray. Father, I am grateful to you for marriage, for Lisa, for the way you've worked in our lives, for the mercy in years past that cover things done wrongly, for trials that shape us and bring us to you, for the knitting together of our lives and in the midst of difficulties, because you are using those for us and you're meeting us there. And that is true that's something we can be thankful for everybody in this room who has walked through similar things and for those who yet will. And I pray, Father, that particularly the men in this room will understand what it means to live with their spouse in an understanding way. Certainly, Lord, wives can do likewise, but men, Lord, help them take the lead. And for the differences that you've brought into our marriages and our relationships, Lord, for those to be the things that we look at with hope and optimism as areas in which you are going to do us good as between us, or in areas where we will do good to one another. And so, Father, I am thankful for the differences that you have divinely appointed amongst us, and for the way you are working in them for our happiness in you. In Jesus' name, amen.